Hey everyone, welcome back to Electoral Dysfunction, the show where comedians and experts debate the news of the week from the safety of their quarantines. I'm your host, Tom Brennan. Thank you so much for joining us for another week. Before we jump into the show, just a couple quick bits of business up top. As you may have heard, the deadline for the United States Census has been extended. But don't wait until the last possible second. You might as well do it now. Head right on over to my2020census.gov. That's my2020census.gov. It takes 10 minutes. Do it today. And that way, when they change the deadline on us again, and it turns out it was like October of last year, you'll already have it done. And you can have your name nice and counted when President Eric Trump opens the camps. And also, as usual, if you want to support the artists, pundits, musicians who do this show, please head on over to patreon.com/electoral dysfunction. That's patreon.com/electoral dysfunction. I will not take a dime. The folks who do this show do so out of the goodness of their hearts. They love this show and they love being a part of it. That means the world to me. And any chance we can give back to them, love to be able to do. So please head on over there and show some support. We have a jam-packed show today. I'm very excited about our panel. Tough week for justice in America.
Extra, read all about it.
Oh my goodness, I hear it, but I don't see. Is that, it's
Extra,
Newsboy Phil. Oh
read
my
all
gosh.
about it.
Newsboy Phil. Oh man,
Wow.
finally some good news, huh?
Yeah, boy, I tell you, I sure missed August 2020 of last year of our Lord who forgot to turn the lights out. Read all about it.
Well, Newsboy Phil, longtime fans of the show know you as the newsboy cursed to walk the world for eternal life after, I believe it was a curse from Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia's mother.
Yes, I grabbed the wrong pie off the ledge.
That pie was just sitting on the windowsill of Gracie Mansion, and that
It was a trap. How was I supposed to know? I wish I could be furloughed.
Oh man, let me tell you something. It's not all it's cracked up to be. But Newsboy Phil, it's good to see you. You know, I can't quite place what's different about you, but I'm sure it'll come to me. But whew, rough week across the country. What's the word on the street? What are you hearing out there?
Well, I was searching for beige bananas behind Port Authority when I got the news that Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. We went to the same school together. Read all about it. I was always jealous of her accomplishments and all she'd done, but most of all, that she got to die. Read all about it.
Oh, goodness. Well, yeah, who among us at this point wouldn't love to be able to die?
I stand on a pile of dead rats, and people tell me that New York is dead, but my pulse remains.
Oh, man. Oh, boy. Newsboy Phil, it's, sad as you are, it's always good to see you. What else are you thinking about the news of the week? It's tough times, huh? We're approaching, I think we're past 200,000 COVID deaths. The president says he won't commit to a peaceful transfer of power.
Surprise! Anybody who says he's just going to turn tail and leave had a shitty COVID response. Just saying, correlate the two, read all about it.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Boy, Phil, I feel like with each passing month, you get a little sadder out there. Is that a fair estimate?
Well, the more I know, the sadder I get. Such as Mitch McConnell no-showed my friend Ruth's wake. The truth is, he was banned, as he may have spit boric acid on the corpse in order to devour the last vestige of hope for this country. Read all about it. You can't smother him with the pillow. He's got no bones in his head.
These are true facts. Things that aren't reported enough about Mitch McConnell. He spits boric acid and has no bones in his head.
Of all the things I know that we live in a failed simulation, despite not knowing too much about computers. People fighting for scraps. Well, I may just pretend to have an adult job because you guys all are just like me now. Weak, scared, and fighting rats with broom handles. And I mean, the rats have broom handles, Tom. They have broom handles. I can't win.
I didn't know the rats were able to get a hold of broom handles now. Wow, that's that is velociraptor-like intelligence out of the rats.
Soon they'll be able to stop paying people as well.
I think I saw that in the CARES Act, that the rats were allowed to cut off any payments if they chose.
Yeah, well, like, who cares, Act?
Boy, Phil, with the state of the world right now as it is there you got any positive news, any good news, any cause for hope?
I mean, I might be able to afford an apartment for a month while we still have a republic. Read all about it.
That's true.
I don't know where, but I mean,
the last 30 days of the republic. What a movie. What else you think about the news of the week? What else is going on
Amy
out there?
Coney Barrett is Trump's Supreme Court nominee.
Mm-hmm.
And remember Coney? Neither do I. Personally, I was banking on Laura Linney's character from Ozark. It's a type of cold-blooded evil I can get behind.
Right.
Or at least James Comey in a wig. I'd like to see that behemoth in heels, just curious, just to see how he handles it. He's very tall. No one counts on that.
That's true. Yeah, that's why he didn't make such a great spy either. I think probably you could see him coming. That's why they moved him into management. I always assumed.
I assume. I wouldn't know about management. If I were an editor, there wouldn't be no paper.
That's a fair point. Yeah, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's likely pick. Still, we're recording this Saturday afternoon. It hasn't been announced yet, but all signs point to ACB replacing RBG. Very conservative judge, as I understand it. The kind of person who, hope you didn't like dancing. Hope you didn't like being able to live out in public. She seems against whatever it is. She's against it. I think that's a fair description of her.
Yeah, it's true. Boy, I tell you, it don't look good. But hopefully, if we pack the court with enough children who can't die that have liberal leanings, we might have this set for a good long while.
That's true. Well, we just found a reason to undo child labor laws. Take the courts back with 5-year-olds.
Precisely. I'm putting myself up for it. Joe Biden, if you win, give me a second. I got to go to my parents' house and find the Trump standee they put at the dinner table in place of me. They say that there's no more public restrooms in New York. Well, there's a restroom, all right. And it's that Trump standee in my parents' house. Win, lose, or draw, I'm pissing on it.
I gotta say, Joe Biden, you could do worse than Justice Newsboy Phil. He can't die no matter how much he'd like to.
That's right.
I think you need to be put on the list. I want more diversity in the court, but we do have to stack this. I'm now imagining a Supreme Court with 46 members, 38 of whom are little children.
Who can't die? You can't be more diverse than immortal children, Tom. I'm just saying.
That's true. As of now, as I understand it, with the exception of possibly RBG, there had been no immortal children on the court. But it turns out not the case. So good to know. Newsboy Phil, it's always a pleasure to see you. Always, despite the dying days of the greatest empire since Rome. Anything to sign off on before you head on out? This
year is getting more and more tiresome. I feel like the color is draining from everything, but as long as we've got friends and as long as we've got hope, we've got a chance to fight. And remember, broom handles, they're really hard on the noggin. if not for the heft, then just for the back off factor, the shock to the system. So if they get the guns, just break the broom off and then you're good.
Boy, that was.
Don't go down without a fight. Read all about it.
Newsboy Phil, few people can be a summer and a winter quite like you, my friend. I'll see you down the road. Ned Thorne, star wipe us to the panel. And join me in welcoming this week's panel. First up, she's a city council candidate, great friend of the show. Good to see her again. Kim Mascaratolo's back. Hey, Kim, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We promise that this show will not be the thing that kneecaps your campaign. Whatever we do, there will be no moment that ends it. Next up, very funny comedian. She is a deacon. She is a Air National Guard Reserve. I love saying that bio because I feel like I'm describing the back card of a G.I. Joe action figure from the 1980s. Hannah Bell. Hannah, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Tom. I'm well. Thanks for having me.
It is good to see you again. Glad to have him on the show. He's an Emmy award-winning writer for his work on The Daily Show. He's the co-host of the Flophouse podcast over on the Maximum Fun Network. Elliott Kalan is here. Hey, Elliott, how are you?
Hi, Tom. I'm good. I'm in Los Angeles, and the sky is the color that the sky is supposed to be. So things are looking up.
Look, 2020 finally turning around here in the last 2 to 3 months.
It's going to pull it out in the last couple months. The last couple months, it's going to pull out a victory
I feel
for
like
the year.
come December 31st, 2020, we'll be like, it was the greatest year ever. At least I hope. And editorial columnist for the New York Daily News, my buddy, my pal, my lifelong chum, Robert George. Robert, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing quite well, Tom. And I'm so happy to hear that Los Angeles sky is like looking the way it's supposed to be, which I guess, having lived in California many, many years ago, I guess it basically means gray. So that's good to know. That's good to know. So,
it was a foggy morning. It was a very foggy morning. I'll give you that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of weird, when all of these, those awful wildfire orange skies, made Californians just like, pray for those days of smog and stuff like that,
Well done, Robert. Really ingratiated us to the West Coast. With that, rough week for justice and rough week for America. As we look back, a lot happened this week, but I think at the beginning of the week, our nation passed the milestone of 200,000 deaths to COVID-19. This against the backdrop of the President of the United States, who as of this recording is still Donald John Trump, seeking to quickly fill a Supreme Court opening after the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This will likely be the fastest confirmation in history as they look to do it before Election Day. We're recording this on Saturday afternoon, so things may change, but all signs point to Amy Coney Barrett to be the nominee. And that is where we will begin today. And I start here, and I'm going to ask Kim Mascaratolo, as someone who comes from a background of activism for the left, and you're one of my go-to people when I'm like, what do I do now? I go over to Kim's page, and there's normally things to do. If you are on the left, what do you do right now in response to this Supreme Court fight? This fight, which could be the most dramatic in the history of the Supreme Court. That's about it.
I mean, anything and everything. I before this was out trying to register voters and get people to fill out their request for absentees. I mean, we're in New York, so I'm, not too worried about that here. But I would say, I think people are doing this, but I would say letting our elected representatives know how much we want them and need them to gum up the works as much as humanly possible, denying unanimous consent, stretching everything out as long as they possibly can on the floor. I know Schumer and the Dems don't have a lot of power in the Senate, but to the degree that they can, stop things from happening, to the degree that they can try to drag the process out as much as possible, I think that they have to. Because, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that they'll be able to stop this, but I think people on the left are demanding that they do everything they can to fight this nomination and to keep someone from being appointed, not just before the election, but before the inauguration. So I would say just letting the representatives know how we feel. And then on top of that, obviously doing everything we can to try to win back the Senate. So, phone banking, text banking for people like Mark Kelly and Sarah Gideon and Hickenlooper in Colorado, and even, some of the ones that I earlier in this year thought didn't really have much of a shot, but seemed to be in contention. People like Jamie Harrison in South Carolina, and even possibly Jon Ossoff in Georgia. I mean, I think turnout's going to be remarkably high, and I think if there was ever any year where we could pull out a lot of victories in the Senate, this would be it. So yeah, just anything and everything. Ask the Democrats to fight and be out there campaigning for every single Democratic Senate candidate, as well as for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because that's pretty much all we can do right now.
I didn't think that I would be the one to correct my Democratic friend Kim over here, but you left out, and I'm forgetting her name though. But you left out Joni Ernst in Iowa, because that's actually even
Teresa Greenfield.
Teresa Greenfield.
That's
that's another good one.
Yeah, because that's an even closer race than Ossoff. I believe that's closer than Ossoff and Perdue, and I think it's a more trustworthy poll than Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham. So I mean that could. Oh, and by the way, and Cal Cunningham in North Carolina.
Yes,
that is State Senator Cal Cunningham, also a living GI Joe action figure, running against Tom Tillis. Our old friend Tom. My advice, if I was to give it to, is to give it to Democrats, and that is to when I say that's both advice to actual senators who are going to be questioning Amy Coney Barrett and other Democrats who are and progressives who are weighing in on this in this debate. I really do think this. If you're wanting to oppose a presidential nomination, this should be a layup for Democrats, because this is one of those. There's always this debate when you get into Supreme Court nominations of qualifications of the nominee versus the ideological competitions and things like that. This is a case where Democrats, I think, should be in a very comfortable position of saying to the public, qualifications be damned. And I say this, by the way, from the perch of an editorial board, where our position has always been, even though we are a center-left editorial board, and I may be slightly center-right, but the board is center-left, and our position has always been that a president, Democrat or Republican, basically gets wide berth on his Supreme Court nominations. Whether we may disagree with the nomination ideologically, we feel if the person is qualified, there's not some absolutely disqualifying character defect, that person should be given the benefit of the doubt and should be approved. This is a different circumstance right here. The Republicans have gone completely 180 degrees from the position they held in 2016, that a nominee cannot be considered or voted upon in an election year. And now they're basically saying, we've got the votes, we've got the power, and we're going to push this through in basically in less than 30 days or about 30 days. So I think Democrats can say, Amy Coney Barrett, she's qualified, she's more conservative than we would like, but no, this is an illegitimate process based on the words that the Republicans used in 2016. And by the way, yes, we also impeached this guy back, the Democrats impeached this guy a year ago, and all the Democrats said that he shouldn't be here. He is an illegitimate president. The process is hypocritical, and we will not support this nominee. End of story. That's a very interesting, that's a very powerful argument. By the way, also supported by polls, which suggest about 55 to 57% of the American people believe that the winner in November should be the person to nominate the next Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. The other thing I would add to that too that I hadn't mentioned was really driving home, I think, to Biden's team that if they push this through, he needs to think really seriously about expanding the court if and when he has that opportunity. And I know that makes some people uncomfortable, but I don't see us surviving a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court. And there have been fewer people in the past. And I think at the very least, I think Biden needs to make it clear that he would do something like that for whatever impact that might have on the decision that the Republicans make. So I think that's something else in our arsenal to kind of keep there with a potential Biden victory, is the possibility of expanding the court beyond 9 people.
I mean, to jump in,
Please.
the Democrats are going to do what they're going to do, what their power allows them to do at this time, which isn't, sadly to say, very much. It's the people on the right who do not co-sign what Trump's doing, but continue to co-sign what Trump's doing, that we need to somehow capture their ear or their attention in this, because yeah, this feels bleak. But I feel like activists wrote a mural in chalk. Youth activists did a mural in chalk outside of Mitch McConnell's home.
Yes. Yeah, it was to politely ask him to wait until after the election. And I would just quickly, I want to comment on the comments Robert George made about the sort of 180 of the Republicans. A friend of mine in Pennsylvania who is not comfortable calling elected officials asked me to help him, like coach him through calling his Senator Pat Toomey. And I was as a result, I ended up conferenced on this call with him. And I gave my friend like all the facts, and like my friend really nailed it and debated this person who answered the phone. And the person who answered the phone in Toomey's office ended with, well, he's going to do it anyway. And I was like, there you go. That's all you need to know about the Republicans right now. A taxpayer from his state pushed back against his argument, and the response was, well, we're doing it anyway.
Yep.
Elliot, thoughts on the Supreme Court battle to come, or lack thereof, and just how it currently feels to watch.
I've been going back and forth on it, partly because my natural inclination when people I agree with are saying one thing is to emotionally start going on the other side, which is not a good thing in marriage, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
And it's not always good in politics, but it's definitely not good in marriage to be like, well, let me equalize this out.
Yeah.
But it feels like there really isn't much the Democrats can do now, and any tool or anything is after the election should we win the election, because I'm a liberal Democratic voter. I'm not going to speak like neutrally or objectively or anything like that.
Sure.
But I feel like the usual levers in this situation, such as like persuasion, like your friend learned, do not work. Shame does not work. It's an entirely a power game right now, and Republicans are very open about. They're like open with a thin veneer of fake logic.
Yep.
About why they're doing this, when it's entirely about the power to do it and that they can do it. And the Trump presidency and the current Republican Party, their philosophy is if we can do it, we will do it. And we not only will we do it, we must do it. If it's possible for us to do, we must do it.
Especially if you're a celebrity.
What?
No, sorry, go ahead.
If you're a celebrity, they let you do it. Yeah, I get it.
Oh, I forgot about that because he's done so much bad stuff.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
That's now the least bad thing he's done at this point.
And the thing that gets to me the most is when Mitch McConnell's like, well, here's the thing. When I said that, it was because the Senate and the president were different parties. And we haven't done that since 1880, which is nonsense. It's like saying we haven't had a president with a mustache since Taft. So clearly we cannot have a president with a mustache. Like a historical trivia becomes like a reason to do something. So I don't know that I've heard so much talk about saying, well, we got to tell them we're going to pack the court. And that seems like it's not going to change Republicans' minds. If anything, it's going to make them be like, let's do it even more. Yeah. And I worry that it would, like Biden's I feel like to a lot of people, Biden's strong argument is, hey, once I'm president, we're not going to be doing things like this anymore. We're going to go back to the way we used to do things, where we could pretend we were all friends, and we could there would be this layer of politeness that covered up how much most of the country hates itself and hates the other people in it. And I feel like if he was openly like, well, then we're going to do this thing, then he becomes a radical, which is not the way. I feel like his strong suit is that he is not a radical, even as much as many of us would like him to be a more radical person. But he's. I mean, I don't know. I've always liked him personally for that reason. If not always wanted him as a candidate. And there was a while after the 2016 election, I really wanted to pitch a TV show hosted by him, where he would just interview a combination of famous people and also ordinary people. Because I was like, who's someone I could imagine talking to any single human being and being genuinely interested in what they're going to say. And then I wanted to have a part at the end where he would sit in a rocking chair and just kind of talk about whatever. Like maybe it's something he did once, maybe it's a book he's reading, like maybe he met a dog that day. But unfortunately, that he had his eyes on 2020, so I could not get through to his people.
And
But
he's the guy. He's the one guy that will say, come on, man, to the guy at the end of the bar, as well as Dianne Feinstein.
Oh yeah, well he reminds me of in that way he reminds me like my dad, where if my dad is waiting online for something, by the end of it, by the time he gets to the counter, he will know the people standing in front of him and behind him online, and he'll tell me all about it in too much detail than I want to hear about. But it turns, I'm getting way off subject, but in terms of this thing, I think what I'm personally feeling right now is that sense of powerlessness of like, there's a tsunami heading towards the city. There's nothing I can do about it. I can try to keep my family protected, but like, I can't stop this tsunami. And I just have to, I do the thing that bugs a lot of my friends, where I look at history and I'm like, well, we've had bad Supreme Courts before, and that's easy to do when I'm a person who is not going to be probably personally affected by much of their decisions, and hard to do when but for the people who will be personally affected by those decisions. So I guess what I'm saying is I have a lot of feelings about it, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm trying to reach a level of Zen about it, which I'm failing to.
I appreciate that. I want to say one quick thing off that, though, is that you're right. It would not be to Joe Biden's advantage politically to explicitly be like, we're going to blow that building up. And but he can, and I think should, say something to the effect of, look, they're doing a lot of damage, and we will do whatever it takes to fix that damage.
Yeah,
like I think everything is on the table. It might be hard
decisions.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, I think, just kind of contrary to what Kim was saying, and I think I do tend to agree with Elliot that a lot of Joe Biden's appeal to a significant segment of the electorate is, stop the madness. Can we get back to something like similar to circa 2014, 2015, where there wasn't something new, crazy happening every single day. That I think is part of Biden's brand. And if his idea of saying, okay, we're going to expand the court, I realize that's satisfying to a certain segment of progressives. I think that kind of goes counter to what Biden wants to look like. That said, if he wins, and if it's a pretty clear-cut win where he picks up some states that haven't gone Democrat in a while, like Georgia, for example. I think Texas is still a little bit is still like a cycle or two away. But if that happens, he can claim a mandate. And my recommendation would be, if the Democrats get in, and assuming Democrats win the Senate, which under the scenario I was just envisioning was pretty likely, the Democrats should embark on a broad-based governmental reform agenda, which would include things that there are some support on both sides for, like expanding the House, which has been set like it is now since the 1920s or the 1930s. Expand the House, expand the Supreme Court, and then also look at this issue of, do you add Puerto Rico? Do you add Washington D.C.? These kind of things. So it would basically be an idea of a broad-based governmental reform approach, which would include the Supreme Court, which would include the House, which would include the Senate, maybe include the other geographic circuits as well. So it's a much broader based discussion, and it doesn't look like you're just trying to get back Republicans stealing 2 seats.
Yeah, I think if it's less of a tit for tat feeling type thing, and it's more of a like, the government's not functioning properly, let's get in there and fix it. I think that would get a lot of support from people. I think the other thing I want to say, which I forgot about, is like, I don't know too much about Amy Coney Barrett outside of the main opinions that I've read about that people talk about from her. And this is possibly not going to be the case. But my hope is always that like her being a human being who lives a life and has experiences and has to work with the liberal justices on the court, like Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are pretty dead conservative, but like they've had their decisions where they go against the way that you think they're going to. There's a richer history on the Supreme Court of people being individuals than there are for every Clarence Thomas, who it's like you could just put a piece of paper that says the same thing in his chair and it would be the same decision every time. It wouldn't change. For there's so many other justices who like, you know, that don't always go the way that you think they're going to. So I think there's still a lot to worry about with her, but hopefully it won't be, hopefully she'll have the experience that so many justices have where they're like,
by the way,
oh, okay, I'm swayed by my friends on the court, you know?
To that point, I think actually, my hunch is that 5 years from now, 5 to 10 years from now, more conservatives will be more disappointed in Neil Gorsuch than they will be, say, Brett Kavanaugh. Because between the LGBTQ decision and the Native American, the Oklahoma tribes decision, Neil Gorsuch has a way of using conservative principles to get to decisions that conservatives don't always like. And so I think he'll be an interesting outlier. I think he'll be more of an outlier than, based on what I've seen of Amy Coney Barrett's. I always want to say Bryant. I think of Nita Bryant.
And I always want to say Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which is also not her name.
Right. That's another one. But yeah,
I'm like Trump's crazy. He's gonna name a dead woman to the court. I mean, beautiful writer. Like her decisions will be beautiful, but
actually, Donald Trump is the type of person that would dead name somebody onto the Supreme Court. So there is that.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, there is. I mean, so many people are throwing around like it's going to be Ivanka. Like he could have at this point gone full Caligula and appointed his horse and all that. So
right.
that he's at least nominating a judge is at this point better than it could be.
And that takes us to our next topic. Before we get to that, Robert, I just want to say bold prediction that there will be a 5 to 10 years from now. Very impressive.
That's what I was thinking too.
Very optimistic outtake on things to come. But what is?
Wait, you're saying there won't be a 5 years from now? Is that?
That's right. Yeah, that's my bold prediction. I think what's interesting to me, talking about this nomination, a thing that comes up a lot, people talk about, particularly on the right, they're like, oh, one of the things that Donald Trump does right is the judicial nominations. My opinion has been that is because he generally doesn't run them. He just lets Mitch McConnell do whatever he wants and rubber stamps it. And it is interesting to me, setting this debate about the next Supreme Court justice against a backdrop where a president has refused to commit to a peaceful transfer of power, as he did twice this week, where the election results could potentially come before the Supreme Court, or decisions over count. It is interesting to me, the two finalists for this job were Amy Coney Barrett and Barbara Lagoa. Barbara Lagoa being probably politically a more advantageous choice for Donald Trump, a Latino woman from Florida, from a major swing state. It is interesting to me that he went with the choice that is probably the choice more of Mitch McConnell. And when I see that, when you combine that choice with the fact that the president's comments this week about refusing a peaceful transfer of power finally did elicit a response from Republicans where they're like, there's going to be a peaceful transfer of power. They have to get to it. I refuse to be optimistic in the calendar year of 2020. That's gone. It won't happen. Optimism is gone. But it was interesting to me that this seems like more of a pick for Mitch McConnell's legacy than Donald Trump's. This seems like less of a, the conspiracy theorist in my head is less concerned about this becoming, is he packing the courts to save his election? And it is more about Mitch McConnell reads the winds better than anyone else in politics and said, hey, it's over. Like, maybe we could win. It's not impossible, but we have a chance to do what this entire party has wanted to do forever. We're doing it now. And you're doing this person, Donald Trump. You're picking our preferred person. Is that, curious about thoughts on that?
It's interesting that you said that, because somebody just the other day was saying, like, politically speaking, if Trump were really concerned about like wanting to ensure, at least make it more likely that he would win, it might almost be politically better for him to just not appoint anybody right now and sort of save, because right now, I mean, not that there weren't already a lot of people who were very angry at Trump, but I feel like the Ruth Bader Ginsburg death and then all of the talk about him immediately appointing somebody has riled people up in a way that I haven't seen in a long time. And politically, I think if he'd been a little bit more, conservative in terms of talking about it and appointing somebody, it wouldn't have elicited that kind of a response. And so it is interesting to me that he's making choices that aren't super politically advantageous for him in terms of his presidential run. And it's an interesting point that it's this notion of we're probably not going to win, so let's at least get the conservative Supreme Court we've wanted so that down the road we can get the decisions that we want. And I hadn't really put those things together, but it's an interesting way to look at it, and I think you're right about that.
Yeah, you can stretch that thing. I was going to say also, like, just there is a drama if he doesn't do it before the election that in theory could play towards turning out a base. But Robert, go ahead.
Well, now I will say this: the day of RBG's death, or it might have been the day after, there was all this, we're all trying to do the Kremlinology of a Senate vote or confirmation, and given that McConnell's initial statement was kind of vague as to exactly when the vote would be, whether it was going to be before election or whether it was going to be in the lame duck. I thought that strategically it made more sense for them to do this. To do this after the election, regardless of whether Trump won or lost. I do agree with Tom that the one smart, consistent thing that Donald Trump has done in his 4 years in office is basically follow Mitch McConnell's guide on who to appoint and when to do it, and pushing them all through. I will say this one thing, that McConnell has actually been consistent in outlaying his reasons for how he will go forward with a confirmation in an election year versus when he won't. He actually said, even in 2016, we have a divided government and we're not going to address this. We're going to not address.
He said in 2016, when we can get the judge we want, then yes, we will do it. That's his consistency. You're saying?
Well, no, but what I'm saying
evil.
I'm not doing it now, but when we have the president, I will do it. I'm not a hypocrite. I said it.
Name me a more consistent person than
Dr. He said that. He actually was more consistent than other Senate Republicans. Other Senate Republicans just use the line, "Oh, we're not going to let the people decide before we make a decision on this. Let the people decide." And they then dropped off the McConnell proviso of saying, well, it's if the Senate and the presidency are of the same party, they kind of dropped that. So they are definitely the Senate Republicans, by and large, are far more hypocritical and inconsistent than McConnell was. That said, while Amy Coney Barrett checks off more boxes for conservatives, social conservatives, as well as legally focused conservatives and so forth. I'm going to say something here that is going to sound a little non-PC, and I hope the ladies that are on the panel
watch yourself here, counselor.
I could also be offended. I'm offended that you don't think I might be offended.
Well, you might be offended as well. In fact, Tom, you may all be offended.
Boy.
Oh man.
Donald Trump has this thing about of his appointments, particularly his judicial appointments, of being coming from his reality show background. He has this like central casting image, and the phrase pops up in so-and-so. He originally liked, it's hard to believe, he originally liked Jim Comey when he first met him because Comey is this like 6'3" or 6'4", dark-haired, good-looking guy. He thought he came out of central casting in terms of running the FBI. Then he quickly turned on him because Comey wouldn't pledge him his support. I think that while Barrett checks all the boxes in terms of the conservative side, I think he thinks that she looks more conventionally attractive in his way in terms of who he would like to see as an attractive woman on the Supreme Court. And even though Barbara LaGoya is Cuban American from Florida and makes a lot and passed the Senate 80-15 previously, I think in Donald Trump's superficial way, I think he thinks that Barrett is more conventionally attractive, and that's one of the things that's in his mind as well.
I'll piggyback on what you're saying and say something even more potentially offensive that I'm putting into Donald Trump's mouth. Is I think he probably looked at those two candidates, thought something like that, and thought, there's a Latina on the court already. There doesn't need to be more than one. You look at the Burger King Kids Club, you look at the X-Men, there's one Latinx character, you never have more than one. Show me any fictional group of heroes or whatever. And he said, we have one of those. I don't need to put another one of those on.
Yeah, I want to point out, Robert, your potentially offensive hypothesis is that Donald Trump is a shallow and potentially racist man. You're like, I don't want to offend anyone, but I think the president might be shallow.
I mean, and he's also someone who he does whatever the last person who talked to him said. So I'm sure McConnell got in last and said, you should go with Barrett. And he was like, I'm hearing good things about Barrett. People are talking about Barrett, And then McConnell made sure that nobody else wandered into Trump's office until the end of the day.
Hannah, I want you to respond to Robert's bold assertion that the president is bad.
I am not offended, Robert. I said hypothesis, and I agree. He governs like it's a reality TV show, and that's a huge problem because it's not. These are real people's lives. This court decides things that impact all the people, not just the people on the top and the people that he can push around in the way that he can push them around. But nothing about Trump at this point. Like, Tom has heard this from me. Every time I'm a guest, I say the same thing. Like, nothing about who Trump is surprising me because he revealed his character on the campaign trail. So none of these decisions are like, oh my God. It's like, no, he's somebody who only cares about himself and will take things.
I was so surprised when people voted for him in 2016 and then were shocked that he was not the man they thought he was. And I'm like, he's been in the public eye for 30 years. Yeah. This is going to show, this is my elitist frame of reference, but I'm like, I was reading an old book of Doonesbury cartoons from the 80s, and there's week after week about what.
By that, Elliot.
I'm so sorry.
This show has a very strong anti-Doonesbury stance, so watch yourself. But continue, Elliot.
I mean, but there's week after week of anti-Trump cartoons when he was just a public figure, not an elected official. He was like, he's always been a bad dude, just like a really bad person, and people knew that. So like, it's hard to be that. Like I'm saying, it's the silver lining for me to this is that he didn't put his son on the court or something like that. It wasn't something crazy.
He probably called both of them to tell them they were considered, though, just to fuck with them because he.
Table.
It was. I imagine every day at his house, it's Donald, Eric, and Ivanka, and it's just King Lear every day. Which one of you loves me the most? Tell me. Well, tell me which one loves me the most.
The only thing I respect about him is that
Tiffany chained in the basement.
Poor Tiffany.
The only thing I respect about Donald Trump is that I hate his sons as much as he clearly hates them. Kim, go ahead, please.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, somebody said this a while back, and it's totally true, which is like Donald Trump is what a lot of people in this country imagine a rich person to be, and everything about him is that, and it's. He was telling us who he was, but he had this persona because of The Apprentice and whatnot, that he was actually like a good businessman. And anybody who like did any research or knew anything about his business ties knew that was absurd, but he managed to create a persona and a character on that show over the years. And I certainly watched the first few seasons of The Apprentice and found it entertaining. And I think a lot of people did. And I think a lot of us really underestimated how much that persona had seeped into that sort of average American consciousness, so that even though he was saying these sort of outlandish things, I really do think among a certain segment of the population, there was this sense of like, well, but he is a businessman and he knows how to do things. I think everyone has been disabused of that notion in the last couple of years, but I do think in 2016 that was something that people really did think deep down, especially, you know, maybe people that like in Middle America and whatnot. I do think that was a part of it, and so I do think that that sort of veneer has been taken off in a way, which I think is helpful to Joe Biden this time around.
And Kim, you know, and it wasn't just in it wasn't just in Middle America as well. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers before me, but if you I think you can Google it online and you can find out that that in the late 80s into the 90s, Donald Trump's name. Donald Trump was probably name checked in more rap songs than just about any other celebrity, because that the lifestyle that he was selling of the big buildings and his name everywhere, the gaudishness and being in the tabloids and so forth, that appealed to a lot of the hip hop lifestyle and so forth. And it wasn't until when he started to go after Obama in like vicious and racist terms and so forth, that started to turn away. But yeah, he sold himself to urban America in a certain way. In the same way, he sold himself to Middle America by adopting the whole WWE stuff as well. But I think though you said something like right. I liked The Apprentice in those first 4 seasons, and what happened with The Apprentice is an interesting kind of an allegory for the mindset of Donald Trump. The first 4 seasons are when he was using real contestants, average people who had different kinds of work backgrounds and so forth, all competing in each other to win an apprentice position in a Donald Trump Donald Trump property or business. I think it was after the 4th season, maybe after the 5th season, he decided to switch to celebrities. He is, for whatever reason, I guess, ratings, the normal people, that don't cut it. So I'm bringing in my celebrity friends and let them go against each other. And I thought, and that's when I think I watched maybe 1 season of it afterwards, and I thought, I'm not interested. But it's an interesting allegory about how Donald Trump is. He'll sell the friend of the average person kind of thing, and then once he gets the thing established, tosses them aside, and he's then hanging with his celebrity friends, he's hanging with his rich friends, and flushing the average person down the toilet.
I'll take a moment to. Sorry, Hannah. What?
Golden toilet.
Yeah, golden toilet.
It's a very nice toilet.
It's a good toilet. Yeah, I will always. Anytime The Apprentice is invoked, I feel duty bound to reference that. Well, America loved The Apprentice. Well, my sister and mother and I watched The Apprentice. One man, Thomas F. Brennan, my father, would get up and leave the room when that show was on because, and I quote, "That man's the worst, and if he ever gets real power, we're screwed." So,
we love Thomas. We love
Thomas F. Brennan. Called it again. Always right, despite what his sister says. So with that, I want to move on to the other story of the week, and big story of this week, of course, the findings from the Kentucky State Attorney General's office in the killing of Breonna Taylor. I think, Robert, you said this best a while ago, either on this show or on Errol Lewis's show, just the one people watch, that it is important when talking about the story of Breonna Taylor that we remember the idea that which is legal is not always justice. And so with that context in mind, the findings from State Attorney General Cameron was that one of the officers involved, who I guess is no longer an officer, was found liable for wanton endangerment and I believe destruction of property, and the other officers, nothing was found, nothing found against them for the killing of Breonna Taylor. Robert, you did a really good job, I think, on Twitter a few days ago, sort of laying out all the facts of this case, and I'm going to ask you to lay them out here again, because I do think it is important context, regardless of what I think is inarguably a, morally speaking, unjust turn of events. But I think the context is important. So if you can lay them out for us.
Right. So the judge approved. The judge approves a no-knock warrant, and the circumstances of that approval, by the way, are murky, to say the least. But putting that aside, the judge approves a no-knock warrant. The police show up at the apartment, and they claim that the police department policy is, even with a no-knock warrant, they're supposed to knock anyway. So they say they knock and announce. Several media organizations had done interviews with the people in the complex, and they say they never heard that the person was, that they never heard the police announce. But the police, the Attorney General says that they found one witness that said that witness says that they heard the police announce. Taylor's boyfriend, Walker, said he was awake. She was still asleep. He hears rattling, attempts to get into the apartment. He wakes her up, reaches for his gun. So he and Taylor are basically in the end of the hallway. Walker sees these people coming in to the apartment, shoots one of the shoots the bullet, I guess, ricochets off the floor into the leg of one of the police officers. The others then start return fire, killing Breonna Taylor. So the AG makes the facts as those detailed are presented to the grand jury, which says that because the police were fired upon, their firing back was in self-defense, and so they're not liable for the death of Breonna Taylor. The other police officer who was outside and then starts shooting, he is charged with wanton endangerment, because his wild shooting went into a nearby apartment, endangering the people in that apartment. So it was not endangering Breonna Taylor; it was endangering the people in the apartment next door. And it seems it's crazy, it's insane, and it's infuriating. And something I did not put on Twitter, because I only found out about it after the fact, is that the person who corroborated the police assertion that they did announce, he initially said in two previous interviews that he had not heard anything. And then the police came and visited him a third time, and then suddenly decided, oh, I misremembered, and actually I did hear them announce. So make of all that what you.
A thing I didn't even think about until this week when this case came out was that I did not actually know until this week what the warrant was even for. And I think that's to me, like, just sort of, I don't know if that's partially me being an uninformed person, but also just this, it was for potentially selling drugs.
Her ex-boyfriend, who they had already arrested. So again, it's confounding as to why this warrant was issued in the first place. They had already arrested him, and from a previous encounter, they thought that she had been holding she had been holding drugs for him in her apartment. And of course, that was obviously false, because after everything that had happened, you're damn pretty sure that if there had been drugs in that apartment, they would have damn near found.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's, it's regardless of the law, it's just frustrating to hear what almost feels like a warrant was almost issued. God, it sounds like such a bureaucratical mess that issued this warrant in the first place, and that the one officer who was indicted, presumably in my head, is just shooting wildly because he hears gunshots. And it's like, if ever there's an indictment of the system, it's this story. This, of course, touched off a week of protests across the country. Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky has called for all the evidence to be released, which I think Governor Beshear, as a Democrat in Kentucky, was in a very difficult spot, and I think comported himself pretty well this week by ensuring that, by both ensuring that there would be resources to protect against any potential rioting while still giving voice to some of these concerns. But it sure feels like there's no justice anywhere to hear this story. And I want to give her thoughts. Hannah, I turn to you first for your thoughts on the week.
Well, I was devastated when I heard, but not surprised. This is not justice. And this is the system functioning how it's designed to function, sadly. And months of protesting, all the attention, the media attention this case has gotten, everything that everybody put into this cause, and this is the outcome, that one person who shot drywall is indicted. That right there is, that's it. That's it. That's why people have to say Black Lives Matter, because you care more about a wall than you care about a woman's life, her community, and her family. So, yeah.
And by the way, just as a button on that, and to make it even to be even more infuriated, the officer, I think it's Harkinson, who did the wild shooting, his bullets went into 2 other apartments. The apartments of white neighbors are the ones that he was charged with the wanton endangerment. The bullets that went into the other apartment, which happened to be owned by a Black couple, there was no wanton endangerment cited for those bullets there. So, which is just some weird ish, as they say in polite terms.
Yeah, that is a polite way of putting it. Yes, Officer Brett Hankinson. Kim, your thoughts.
I mean, I don't know what I can say that hasn't already been said, except that, Robert is absolutely right in that it's a complete miscarriage of justice, and also was technically all completely legal. And I think that's the thing that everyone is having the hardest time with. Like, how can you justify someone being shot, essentially? I mean, I guess there's some question about whether she was asleep or had just been woken up, but I mean, regardless, like, you're just asleep in your home and suddenly you are shot by police and you lose your life, and that nobody gets held responsible for that. Somebody made the point on Twitter the other day, and I thought it was such a compelling point. She said she was a nurse, and if she accidentally gave a patient the wrong medication, even if it was completely unintentional, she would have been fired. She would have lost her license. There would have been an entire investigation about it. The notion that people who do law enforcement, and I'll say straight up, my dad was a police officer for many years, the notion that there is this level of accountability that doesn't exist for police officers is absurd. Whatever happened that night, a woman lost her life for absolutely no reason. And the notion that there is no accountability, that that nobody immediately lost their jobs. I mean, everything about this is horrific and speaks to the need to completely reimagine what policing and what community safety looks like in all of our communities. And I think people are starting to understand that. We're seeing, city councils in Minnesota and other places who are completely dismantling and sort of rebuilding this notion of, a department of community safety as opposed to a police department. I think those are the things that are going to have to happen, because everything that happened here at the systemic level was so egregious and so awful, that our system, that we just know that whatever's legal or illegal, our system at this point is completely unjust. And that's where we need to attack the problem, because there is no accountability for anybody. And I think that is one of the greatest tragedies of this entire scenario, is that nobody will be held responsible for this woman losing her life for absolutely no reason.
I think and that point about accountability is so important too, because I think we forget, I've my more recent jobs worked with police officers. I recognize, how difficult their job is, but, there is also part of me, it's like, and, that's what the money's for.
Right.
And I think, and I thought I've always had that kind of cuts both ways, and it doesn't, it more runs parallel to this. It's crazy to me that when a police officer fires their gun, and they're right, like, let's say they are justified in it, and perhaps even take a life, they're justified in it, that they're still allowed back on the streets, relatively quickly. And I don't say that to judge the officer, but like, that's a traumatic thing for a human being to go through. I've always felt like the minute an officer fires their bullet, they should at least, it's like, you're on death duty while we make sure this was right, and also while we make sure you're okay. And yet it's just sort of like, it's exactly as you said. It seems like we deal with how police shooting the way we deal with like an administrative assistant dealing with a copy machine. It's like,
I will make this just a slight edit on that, Tom. Mm-hmm. And obviously, this varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Sure.
In New York, in some of the biggest, most controversial cases, if there's a loss of life, that person does stay on desk duty for some time. Like, for example,
sure.
even though Daniel Pantaleo, who was the cop involved in the death of Eric Garner, even though it took them 5 years to finally fire him, he was on desk duty that entire that entire time, and going back 20 years, similar to some of the cops that were involved in the death of Amadou Diallo, which was for folks of a certain generation, that was like the initial episode that was the initial episode that started people getting focused on this issue of police violence.
Well, and to clarify, like, I know it does happen. I just more mean, like, in my mind, that should just be a national standard for any case, and not just the troubling cases. I think, we're dealing with human beings, and I find it fascinating that it's kind of viewed as just sort of like, yes, I get that it's part of the job, but it is a real thing that I think deserves more scrutiny. Elliot, your thoughts on the Taylor case? And
I wanted to back up also what Kim was saying in kind of abstract conceptual terms, which I hope is not taken as coldness, because this is such an infuriating and like heart-sickening case, because it is, like Robert was saying, that it is a great example of how legality does not always equal justice or morality or rightness. And like, it's far from the first time, and it will not be the last time, that in this country especially, something is legal when it is horrifically terrible, and horrifically unjust. But it seems like the equation should be that the more responsibility you have, the more accountability you need to have. And yet in our country at this moment, and probably throughout human history, I don't live anywhere else. This is the only time I've lived in. I haven't lived in other times in history. For some reason, that's been flipped. Mm-hmm. And the more responsibility you have, the less accountability you have. And that's the old thing about, about like Abu Ghraib, where you can throw the soldiers who did it in jail, but the people who ordered those soldiers to do it end up retiring and writing books and going on TV and talking about all the great things that they've done and things like that. And I guess that it's like it's probably an old adage, but I haven't heard it, so I'm going to say it like it's not. But that power is the enemy of accountability. That like it all is like we're talking about with McConnell and the courts. It all comes down to how much power do you have in a system, and there's no greater power than to be able to legally remove someone from existence, you know, and that should be followed by intense accountability, but it's not. And people who have that power also have immense power to affect the legal system and the way that the legal system is, the laws are written and the way the laws are enforced through that implication of that power. And so this is all very abstract and conceptual. Like that, it's not that abstract, but it's somewhat abstract, where it's like the problem is the law, the application of the law, and our thinking about the law and the way police handle things and what we expect of police, or rather what the people who are in positions to make those decisions expect of police. And it's like there's no short answer, and it takes long, like solid, like work to change any of that. So it's just like, my worry is that there's so many of these types of cases. This is a particularly egregious one, but there's so many of them that are all egregious that I wouldn't want people to get beaten down by them to the point where they're just like, that's just the way life is, when it's about human laws and human actions in relation to those laws and how we hold people responsible to those. And it's a long, slow, slogging process, but it's like not too late to change that for people in the future who will be in, hopefully will not be in those situations, but may find themselves in those situations.
To upend a well-known phrase from a publication that from a corporation that Tom Brennan once worked for. We're now because we're in these perverse, potentially end times, we've gotten to the point where with great power comes irresponsibility. And
nice.
And what? Not
familiar with that quote, but
yeah, Tom mentioned Andy Beshear, who's the governor, the Democratic governor of Kentucky, and he was trying to both address the pain of the people marching in the streets, while also standing up as an institutionalist, trying to give respect to the institutions, even when the institutions are failing. Meanwhile, excuse me, I nearly said David Cameron. Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General, who is standing up as as the law executor or the law interpreter. Look, there's an old saying about district attorneys and attorney generals and so forth. A prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if that prosecutor wants to. And it's very interesting. The lawyers for Breonna Taylor, who kudos to them. They got the municipality to pony up $12 million in a wrongful death suit early on. So kudos to them. But they also want, besides the money, they want transparency as well, and they're calling for the release of the transcript of the grand jury to find out exactly how did this Attorney General present this case, because he could very well, even with the facts at hand, still have presented something that would have nudged them in the direction of an indictment. And for whatever reason, and he also, by the way, he was also asked by a reporter at the press conference what was the racial makeup of the grand jury, which I think in cases like this is somewhat germane. You obviously can protect the identity of the grand jury, for their privacy and security and so forth. But there's no reason to say why you can't say, if it was 18 people there, was it 2/3 white? Was it 90% white? Was it all white? That's transparency. That transparency needs to be there. Otherwise, we are in this situation where you have somebody like the Attorney General, who, by the way, 3 years from now, is I think it's 3. I think he is up, and he's up in either 2021 or 2023.
2021.
2021. He is either going to be standing for re-election, or he's going to be challenging Andy Bashir. And because all you had to do is take a look at the Republican National Convention, he most likely has national ambitions, and I think the Republican Party has national ambitions for him as well.
Correction, 2023. Sorry about that.
By the way, for those who don't remember, he's African American. He's in Kentucky, and he is somebody that if he ended up running for governor in 2023, it would not be surprising that whoever the Republican nominee is in 2024 would take a good look at him as a vice presidential possible.
And I think one other thing just there, what's interesting to me, all these various Kentucky players, of course, Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, and Senator from Kentucky, who has a lot of sway over that party and was a big booster of Cameron as a candidate. A thing that is also interesting on the other side of that, who else represents Kentucky in the Senate? Everyone's favorite loose cannon, Rand Paul, who back in July did introduce legislation to ban no-knock warrants. And there's one thing Rand Paul loves to do when a Democrat is in power is suddenly care a lot about civil liberties. So if Joe Biden wins, I'm very curious to see what happens to this debate in the state of Kentucky, particularly in a world where you could have Rand Paul on the same side as an activist base that is a little more to the left.
Rand Paul, by the way, to his credit, is also one of the handful of Republicans who believes the qualified immunity laws, in terms of the way they protect police, need to be revised. So
I got a lot of issues with that guy, but on issues of criminal justice, he has a lot of very good points.
The way he stacks his wood in it, or the way his neighbor stacks his wood in his yard is it's a major problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like.
Elliot, I think we all know that dispute between Rand Paul and his neighbors had nothing to do with stacking wood in the yard. There might have been some wood stacking going on, but it was not what was going on in the yard. Let's put it that way.
Oh my goodness.
It was not what was going on in the backyard.
Right. That's a reference to, I believe, both of their underage children. Nice work, Robert. And with that, we'll call it a show for this week. Before we head out, quickly go around. Elliot, anything to plug or promote?
Sure, I'd love to plug. You mentioned my podcast, The Flophouse, which is a bunch of nonsense that me and my friends talk about ostensibly about movies, but we just did an episode that was just me as Tom Brokaw talking about Dune for 40 minutes.
It's a great episode.
Thank you. It was a dream come true. But I have a new children's book, either out or coming out, depending on when this comes out. It comes out September 29th. It's called Sharko and Hippo. It's a children's picture book. A shark and a hippo, they're going to go fishing. The shark keeps asking the hippo for stuff, and the hippo keeps giving him things that sound like what he's asking for, but are not what he's asking for. And my kids like it. So that's all I can say about it. I think it's funny. And that follows up a previous picture book I did called Horse Meets Dog. The horse thinks the dog is a little horse. The dog thinks the horse is a big dog, and they argue about that. Picture books about arguments. That's what I'd like to promote.
It's a good, hey, look, it's easy. It's an easy market. Kim, anything to promote?
I guess just my website, votekim.nyc. If folks are interested in local New York City politics, you should check it out. And that's about it.
Thank you very much, Kim. Hannah, anything to plug before we take off?
I just want to say that I registered the vote, and I believe, maybe the people who listen and who view here should also make sure they're registered. I did mine, not to brag, on Hobbits Day, September 22nd.
Of course.
But yeah, check all that stuff and make sure those I's are dotted and those T's are crossed.
Yes, absolutely. If you're in the New York City area, head over to voting.nyc to check that. And if you're national, I don't know what website you go to, but I'll edit it in later.
And if you're in Pennsylvania, put your ballot in that envelope. Yep. It needs to go in that special magic envelope that makes votes count.
No naked ballots in Pennsylvania, please.
Yeah.
Look, this is a state that elected Bud Dwyer. They take this stuff seriously. That was a joke for James Heskey and no one else. Robert George, anything to promote before we call it a day?
No, just as of right now, just the wonderful New York Daily News, and obviously you can always follow me at Rob George on Twitter, where you can come for the puns and stay for the analysis, or come for the analysis and stay for the puns. You know, it's your choice.
You'll win either way. And by the way, the Daily News, the first 10 articles online are free, so it's worth it. Thank you very much, panel, for this week's show. And with that, another couple of thanks. I'm going to throw a quick thank you to Kevin Scott for our show animation. Thank you to Joanne Harris for the show theme song. Thank you to Declan Shalvey and Jordy Belair for our electoral dysfunction eagle art. And thank you to my buddy Ned Thorne for helping me put these together every single week. Now, to play us out this week, we're throwing it over to the great city of Las Vegas in Nevada, where electoral dysfunction's former legal consultant, Jordan Wolf, is going to play us out this week. Head on over to his website, jordanwolf.bandcamp.com. And with that, Ned Thorne, star wipe us to Las Vegas.
Hey, everybody, it's Jordan Wolf coming to you from Wolf Studios, coronavirus style. Pandemic, baby. This is a song I wrote called Lottery Ticket. I hope you guys like it. I've been working really hard for my whole life. Tried my best to do things right. Waiting for the day when my ship will finally come in. But the more I try to get my foot in the door, things get even worse than they were before. Now my soul overwhelming, the boat stopped to where they. Well, I got one more glimmer of hope between my fingers. One more dream that's always up for sale. Well, one more way to pretend that I'm ever getting out of this mess that I'm in. Got a lottery ticket, praying to God I win. Well, I got more plans than an architect, but it don't matter much if all my money is spent. At the end of the month, there ain't an extra cent to go round. But I keep on treading out of bed each day, driving to work without a second to waste, so I can retire when they put me in the ground. Well, I got one more glimmer of hope between my fingers. One more dream that's always up for sale. Well, one more way to pretend that I'm ever getting out of this mess that I'm in. Got a lottery ticket, praying to God I win. I'm always picking up the pace, putting forward my best face to try to be the fastest driver, driving in a losing race. Yeah, yeah. Well, one more way to pretend that I'm ever getting out of this mess that I'm in. Got a lottery ticket, praying to God I win. I got a lottery ticket, praying to God I win. I got a lottery ticket, praying to God I win. Take it easy, guys.